And this, I think, is the biggest danger that we see here today, is that architecture has become a tool of capital. And hence it is turning increasingly into a mercantile profession, relinquishing, in a sense, its potential to play a much bigger, broader role. Today it's about essentially novelty, what you call flashy, right? And novelty sells, right? And that's it. I mean, architecture has become this kind of, it's become more exotic, right? But it doesn't need to be, right? And hence for us, this is what we resist. This is what we try and work against. But more importantly, to be able to demonstrate that other possibilities exist. And I think fundamentally we see that, we hope that the projects that we do or the work that we do points to those possibilities. As an office, Serie was founded by my partner Christopher Lee and myself, 2006, 2007. And we have 3 offices right now in Bombay, London and Beijing. But having said that, we're still about 40 to 45 architects across all 3 offices. So we're still a medium-sized office. So most of our work currently is in Asia and the Middle East. We do finally have our first project in London, first couple of projects that are now under construction. If you look at the difference between the Asian city and the European city, it's essentially the European city is a welfare state. It's the idea that it's about the public good. The idea that the city and its architecture should be in service of the people. And hence you have a framework where you arrive at consensus collectively, and there are platforms and that are available for people to engage in basically public discourse. The Asian city is the city of profit, right, or the developmental city, which is fundamentally built around the idea that cities are primarily economic engines, and this has largely driven most of the development that you actually see. So it's either private, largely private in nature, as you see in India, or often state-sponsored, as you see in China. But they still, it is in a certain sense the actual privatization of the public realm. And this is why, in a certain sense, you see this kind of, let's say, disjunction, because capital needs to reproduce itself, and often, design which offers any resistance to it, does not propagate that easily. Hence, this idea of architecture as a cultural artifact, the idea of an architecture which foregrounds, public interest, may not necessarily be, may not resonate with the demands of capital. So, capital finally translates into real estate. So there is a difference between architecture and real estate. And unfortunately in Asia, we have been kind of agnostic to that separation, which is why you also see, in a sense, just this kind of incredible, construction activity that is happening, which is broadly disconnected from its fabric, from its context, from its location, from any kind of sensitivity to its history or its culture. And this, I think, is the biggest danger that we see here today, is that architecture has become a tool of capital. And hence it is turning increasingly into a mercantile profession, relinquishing, in a sense, its potential to play a much bigger, broader role. We are a colonial or a post-colonial society, and most of the kind of cities and the artifacts that we have, besides the kind of pre-colonial sets of buildings that we have, they define our cities today, or at least that is the bedrock on which our cities were built. And colonial architecture comes out of essentially Western thought. So it's kind of important to understand those underpinnings. So I think, for a more well-rounded education, I think, understanding history or having enough of historical knowledge at the back of your head as some kind of database, if you might, I think can only enrich your experience, or can only enrich your understanding of of building and design.
Itself?
No, but architecture itself is no longer seen as a kind of artistic discipline.
It is. It does need
People
a lot
don't,
of other things.
students, and I think maybe this is important to say, that a lot of students, you realize, also join architecture because they realize it's a great profession to make a lot of money in.
Money.
And I don't think that should be a reason, or you should not join architecture for that reason. As in, finally, it is a discipline, it is a profession where, yes, you will make money, right? But it is just that you begin to imagine the architect or the wealth that is possible as something that is tied to the fortunes of the real estate sector, right? And I think that's the problem, right? That the sheer width and breadth of skills and knowledge that are necessary to create a good architect, absent. It's a difficult time.
Without it, actually.
Yeah, and of course now sustainability has become the other buzzword. Everyone wants to, everyone's talking about. No, it's very important at the same time. It is very, very important. But you have to really feel for the cause. You have to really believe that it's a question of values as opposed to something that the market demands.
Yeah,
Right? You need a lead consultant on board because it's a box that needs to be ticked.
yeah.
Right?
And you get
As opposed to really talking about,
returns look better.
that you have designed a building intelligently, looking at passive design principles rather than just looking at green technologies as something that you can plug into the building later.
Yeah, that's
So that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So we are designing our first complete zero energy campus in Singapore. This is going to be the School of Design and Environment for the National University of Singapore, and that building is a zero energy building. It is off the grid, and that for us is so exciting, because you're still learning, you're still in this process of discovery, and I think that's just incredible for us as an office, to be engaged in projects where your learning curve just continues to move upward. I think while we're very keen to continue working with developers more than anything else to keep up that level of engagement with them, and continuously strive to create projects that at least show another way, right? To be able to satisfy, as I said, both the demands of capital, but to create something that is more valuable. But our institutional projects are, of course, very exciting because you can have, those are projects where you share the same value systems with your client, and hence the ability to create projects that are probably even more daring, or projects that are even more, I would say, experimental. We're doing a lot of research into knowledge environments, right? And we're building a science park in Singapore. We're building another campus in Bangalore now, and all of these are also pointing to this idea that in the knowledge economy, today, kind of startups are really where there's a massive amount of capital that's kind of flowing in that direction. But how do you create the kind of environments that foster innovation and inventive thinking? So we're constantly exploring, of course, also the connection between industry and academia, and how do you bring the two together? The ideas are finally validated by human experience, by the user experience. So our buildings, we're very, very careful when it comes to functionality, performance, right? I think those are very important aspects of the project. We may not necessarily foreground those ideas in a discussion about the work, but it's always present. And of course, we want people to be moved by the spaces that we create. We want them to be very tactile. We want them to be beautifully crafted and beautifully designed. So in that sense, these are, fairly traditional, ideas of what architecture is. And of course, though they remain incredibly important to us, the user experience, the human experience, the phenomenological experience of space is very important to us.